It would seem we're at the point where I can no longer ignore it. The Florida Mayhem's season has quickly spiraled out of control. The worst part about it is there's currently no end in sight either. The main take situation was the final straw. Not to sound like a jerk, but the situation is kind of messy right now. So that begs the question, what is wrong with the Florida Mayhem? We're going to be discussing all of that and more in the second episode of this year's What is Wrong with Your Team series. If you're new to this kind of video, you'll find that it has a very simple format. My goal is to focus on struggling teams. I usually start with an overview of said team, then go over some of their issues that I have noticed this year. Along with their problems, I like to try and theory craft potential solutions which may have a chance of helping them get back on track, but of course, keep in mind that I am by no means a pro or anywhere near that level, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. It's just my personal ideas. These videos have criticisms in them and everything, but it's all tough love. I never mean any sort of hate or disrespect towards any of these rosters. It's all about trying to help. This especially goes for a team like Florida, who are supposed to be so much more this year. That is the gist of it though, so let's get right into this. Let us begin with an overview of how the season has been going for the Mayhem so far. As of right now, they have a 4-8 record with a negative map differential, which is good enough for 10th place in North America, and a bottom 6 record overall in fact. It doesn't take a genius to tell you that is a giant problem for a team of this caliber. They should not be this low in the rankings. Things have gone wrong very quickly, which is really unfortunate given the start they had. Since the May Melee, where they had a very impressive showing, they have taken one of their last 8 matches. They are ice cold. They have dug themselves into a major hole. And if they don't win at least 3 of their next 4 in the Countdown Cup, or all of them, that would probably be the best thing for them, then their road to the playoffs will be coming to a close early, most likely. For those of you who need a quick refresher, only the top 3 teams in North America automatically make the playoffs this year. There's 2 other spots available in this region through the play-ins, but I don't even know if the Mayhem are going to qualify for that. Even if they do though, that would mean they're going to have to play the higher seeded teams if they stay where they are in the standings, which makes their lives even more difficult. What really sucks about it all is they don't exactly have any gimmies in the month of August. Their easiest match on paper, I would say, is Boston, and even that could be a challenge given how much this team has steadily been improving as of late and the fact that Boston rolled them recently. Make no mistake though, Florida could realistically win all of their matches in August since they do have the talent needed to compete, but it's tough to see that happening in their current state, you know? And I don't really know if a few weeks are going to be enough to change that state. I am very concerned about the Mayhem because they're in a really dangerous spot right now, even though they could just be so much more than what they are right now. So what the heck is going on with them exactly? Let's identify some of their issues. The first one is the biggest and easily the most obvious. It's the one that everybody's been talking about, and that is the main tank situation and how it has been spiraling out of control. We all knew about this as soon as we saw the checkmate news. When you are willingly putting a DPS player on main tank, you are heading into some dangerous territory. And it's not even the first time we've seen somebody from a different position swap to main tank, so that's why we know this is a bad place for them. Historically, it has never worked out for anybody who has tried it. The Houston Outlaws won a few games with hydration last year, and that's probably the best example we have of it working out, if you even want to call it that. I think maybe Jaehong won a few games with Seoul. You have Taimu and how that didn't work out at all. All of these examples are kind of just failures, though. All of it makes for some grim odds if you're the Florida Mayhem, because historically, you are in some deep trouble if you would rather go in that direction than field an actual main tank player on your roster. The Mayhem are in a tough spot, too, because they decided to go with a 7-man roster. By getting no backups at tank whatsoever, it essentially became OG or bust this year. Some people will say, well, why don't they just get another main tank right now? Well, Florida are too worried about ping issues if you did not already hear. They'd rather field Checkmate, who they signed to play DPS, than get somebody who naturally plays this position. Now look, I get it. Playing on ping means a disadvantage, but wouldn't it be better to bite the bullet and get a main tank anyway? I would argue your chances are at least a little bit better, but hey, if they feel like that's not an option, then what can you do? I'm assuming the reason they had such a small roster was because of a tight budget, maybe it could be something else, but because Florida's in this situation, they decided to gamble on OG with that one shot they had at main tank, and now unfortunately, they have to live and die by this decision. Something is going on with OG. It does not take a rocket scientist to figure that out. I don't want to sound like a jerk here, but I can't say I'm entirely surprised, and I mean that in like a really nice way because I love OG. But let's just call it how it is. His mental has been pretty up and down throughout the years. I had faith in Kuki to help him play better, but there's only so much he can do for him when it comes to that mental aspect. OG is an absurdly momentum-based player. When he's in a good state of mind, he dominates the opposition, but the moment that there's a meta change or he suddenly loses his confidence in himself or something else goes on with drama, that level of play takes a hit or he finds himself wanting to take a break. In this case, I'm assuming the second thing might have had to do with Florida's decision. They don't see OG as the sole issue, as they've been talking about, but clearly they don't see him as part of the solution at this moment in time. If they're looking for ways to incorporate him back into the lineup, then something ain't right here. Whether it's a mental thing, him not being what the team needs, or something in between, this is a tough situation. And to be fair, there have been some moments where him and the team have not been on the same page with engagements and whatnot. But I feel like that happens with most teams from time to time anyway. In my opinion, OG for the most part has played fairly well this year. Are the Mayhem making the right choice here? I would say it's too early to tell given that Checkmate has only played this new role for 2 games, but I automatically lean towards no given the history of these types of choices. I think the meta shifting around might have messed with OG and the squad a tiny bit. It felt like they had less options once Reinhardt got banned, and that really screwed them over. It's as if this team had less of an idea on how to play around their main tank afterwards. When things were set in stone during the preseason and the May Melee, things were great, but as soon as hero pulls hit in the June Joust, you start to see the numbers go down. Without Fate, Florida's production on bunker comps in particular took a hit. Orisa, I will admit, is a hero OG has not been that great on historically. He's not feeding or anything, he just seems to lack the ability to set up plays the way Fate did in the past. It's too early to judge, but Checkmate might actually end up being an improvement on that specific role if we give him enough time. But what I find funny is OG has honestly done fine from an individual standpoint. If you look at his Winston stats in the May Melee compared to the June Joust, there is little to no difference. He consistently trends towards the top of how fast he can charge a primal, while maintaining one of the lower death rates in the league. That's right, even when Florida went 1-3 in the month of June, OG was still one of the most productive Winstons in the league statistically. OG has low-key been pretty respectable across the board. There's just something missing. Statistically, he does what he has to. It's clearly more of a team thing. The team just can't figure out how to play around him properly at times. Maybe it's because he's more of a playmaker who requires resources, unlike a Fate who is more so about setting up his teammates. That in itself could be the issue. When Florida played double shield this year so far, they've consistently relied on their DPS, but without a prolific Orisa player, it might be a bit harder to get them going. In the case of like a Winston Rush, for example, you have to put a lot of your resources into the main tank, which does not favor Yaki and BQB, who of course prefer to have those resources focused on them. Right now, OG really could just be a poor fit. Simply from how the team operates, it could mess up their flow since their strong point comes through Yaki and BQB. That may explain why OG is taking a seat on the bench. Again, I'm just theory crafting, but it would kind of make sense, I feel like, because Checkmate enables his teammates better in some situations, maybe. Now, obviously, this was only the case on Orisa during the weekend, but still, you saw what happened. The likes of BQB, Yaki, and Gargoyle, I thought they all had themselves a game at one point or another. The issue was his play was very questionable on Rhine, though. That could improve with time, of course, but that's the issue, right? I keep bringing up time with Checkmate, but Florida really don't have much of it. These last 4 games of the season could decide if playoffs are even in their future. They only have a few weeks if Checkmate is the guy they intend to start full-time moving forward. As somebody with very little time on this role, this does not seem like the right decision to me because it is way too risky. Unless OG just doesn't have it in him to continue for the rest of the year, I would like to see the Mayhem have Checkmate focus maybe on one specific hero. The team seemed alright with him on Orisa, so maybe a solution moving forward could be to play Checkmate on Orisa, then have OG use everything else. You could possibly speed up Checkmate's progression on this role without sacrificing all that much productivity since he's limiting his focus to mostly one hero. With that said, this approach can be very risky. Seeing as the meta has been wide open this year, you run the risk of teams dominating you if you find a counter, as you don't really have the option of swapping. Another potential solution for this position that seems obvious but is not talked about often is OG changing his style of play. It's not talked about for good reason, of course, because this is absurdly difficult to pull off, especially mid-season when you only have a few weeks to make those kinds of adjustments. But even just from a general standpoint, this is hard no matter how much time you really have. We're talking about trying to change years worth of habits, and that is no easy feat. But at this point, it might be Florida's best option. Move OG along fast. He's been doing a great job of playing smart this year, so he's already won half the battle by reliably staying up for long periods of time during team fights. I would much rather have a true main tank in there than your flex DPS when you know that OG can be more reliable. It's not like when Mumo was making terrible decision after terrible decision on the Outlaws last year, you know? This is different. OG has to get back in there fast. But of course, changing your style of play when it's largely been the same for 3 years is not something that can easily be undone. It's all up to OG and the coaching to work with each other here. If they can't figure it out, the Mayhem might be screwed. There's not a lot of options available and there's not much time to work with. It's now or never. I've talked a lot about the main tank position because it's their clear-cut biggest issue. I mean, that goes without saying. But is there anything else that could be wrong with Florida? Well, I would venture to say there has been an over-reliance on general individual heroics. A lot of it has to do with Yaki making a big play on Tracer, or BQB going off on the McCree and the Ashe. They truly are the biggest strength of this roster. That couldn't be more obvious. But when they feel like they're sometimes the only playmakers on the team, that can be a pretty big issue. And I mean that for multiple reasons. One is their inability to win teamfights at times. Two is the team potentially tunnel visioning a bit too much on supporting their DPS. There have been times where the Mayhem pump too many resources into them. It results in this unbalanced approach. They feel like less of a team and more like a highlight reel showcase of some sort. This is not the only case where individual heroics are dependent on though. Don't just think of the DPS. I think it happens with Gargoyle too. How many times have we seen that guy win or turn a fight with a huge diva bomb to save his team? Don't get me wrong, it is great to have your carries who can bail you out from time to time. In fact, every championship team needs these types of guys. But when there's an over-reliance on them, it can feel like you're not playing enough as a team. Look at the most successful rosters in the league. What do they all have in common? They play all together, like a real team. Their individual players have their moments, but a lot of the time everything is well telegraphed. Even when the Mayhem were finding success in the month of May, this was kind of lacking at times. Sometimes it was all about Yaki by himself just playing out of his mind. Individual heroics can only get you so far. The way the team operates currently is not good enough. And I don't just mean it with their over-reliance on individual play. Generally speaking, I find this team to be a little too passive. They're just not decisive enough. Patient and disciplined play is fine. It can work at this level. But there's such a thing as too cautious. The Florida Mayhem statistically are one of the slowest, most methodical teams in the league. They seem to take less fights than the average team does. With how much they've been losing as of late, this might not be the best thing. For a team who's really good, this is something you want. It means you're in control. You're the one dictating the tempo, and you can quite easily set the tone early on and possibly gain the advantage if you get the other team to play your game. But when you go for this reactionary style in a losing effort where everybody's not on the same page clearly, it does you no good. If anything, it gives you less chances to turn a game around. That's why the way Checkmate played over the weekend was a refreshing sight to behold. Yeah, it didn't really work. In fact, it was very bizarre, but he has the right idea. Keep the enemy on their toes, take the fight to them, put a natural main tank player with better decision making in there now, and you might see the results you're looking for. Checkmate played main tank at the Overwatch League level for a week so far. He made a ton of mistakes, and there's potential for something like this to work with OG in the lineup I feel if they just switch roles. Put him back in there. Follow OG's lead. Be aggressive. Be decisive. The NYXL from years past kind of had the same issue. They were very talented, but the good teams knew how to get a read on them. It was all about waiting for Jonek or a DPS to do something, or just waiting for the enemy to slip up with a major mistake of some kind. If you pushed them out of their comfort zone and you made them play fast, or you pressured one of their tanks and forced Jonek to make a mistake, it was usually a GG. I'm seeing the same thing kind of play out with Florida years later now. They play so carefully, and again, it all has to do with telegraphing plays for like Yaki and BQB. There's just an over-reliance on them. They thrive in these slow paces, which is why they love double shield so much. There's too much waiting and not enough action outside of it. I'm a big fan of disciplined play. When I see low death rates, I am usually a very happy camper. But when your team is lacking success, it just doesn't mean all that much. And when you look into it further, it might even help if the team and/or specific players get more aggro. Attempt to be a bit more risky with your positioning, take new angles, do what you gotta do. Take Slime, for example. He's been having a relatively decent season, I would say, but there seem to be certain comps where he's not as much of a factor. Comps involving Brig in particular have been pretty meh for him this year. He's not feeding, which is always a plus. I think under 5 deaths per 10 is pretty nice, but he's clearly not getting enough value out of that passive. A bottom 6 healing and damage rate per 10 would suggest to you he's not getting up in there enough on the front line. It's pretty weird to think about when considering that Slime is known for his aggressive style. but for some reason, he just plays Brigitte way differently than he does Lucio. He's so much more reserved, and you could really see it when watching him play, I feel like. While I'm sure part of it has to do with how Florida wants him to play, this is actually nothing new if you look at Season 3, because it shows a very similar trend with his stats. The one difference being that he healed a bit more on average. That makes me think he might not be getting enough value with the repair packs either. It goes to show that a push in tempo could be just what him and this team needs in that specific composition. And this honestly applies to other members of this team, not just Lime. I mean, take for example Gangnam Jin. I love that guy to death. He's one of my favorite flex supports in the league, and I very much enjoy watching him play. But even I have to admit that it might help if he takes more aggressive angles from time to time. It helps to maybe land a few more sleeps or bio nades, you know? Or maybe it'll be enough to keep his tanks up in a fight for just a few moments longer, what could be just what they need to turn a fight. Don't just wait there and sit comfortably. Take some more risks. If the Mayhem had a good record, I wouldn't care so much. Do what works for you. But with how hard they're struggling, some risks just need to be taken. Get out of your comfort zone, but do so intelligently, because we all know they're capable of doing that. I'm not saying they have to completely change their style. That actually might do more harm than good. But they should be playing less reactionary at times. Don't be so indecisive. Get in there and make some plays happen as a team. This might sound stupid, but have your supports play around your DPS and tanks a bit more. Get them more involved. Have them play with you more. It's a help me so I can help you type of thing. Don't let the consistent performances of Yaki go to waste. When he's going on the Tracer, be there with him. Help him out. Oftentimes, he dictates the tempo for Florida, you know? He demands a lot of attention from the enemies at the same time, though, so take advantage of that. Apply additional pressure. Don't just sit there and wait. It's a new year. The meta is not nearly as stagnant. Double shield comps aren't played as much by far. The slow, methodical approach is not always going to work. It almost feels like Florida are living in the past in a way. You were great last year, but if you don't continue to adapt and evolve, you're just going to get left behind. The Mayhem have what it takes to be a threat. We've seen them push some really good teams to their limits this year. We've seen them make a tournament, but we've also seen them lose some very winnable games in rather sad fashion, I'd like to add. There's no time like the present, Mayhem. Use the next few weeks to reset your mental, because right now, it's clear that you're lost. There's visible frustration with some of your guys. It's time to work hard, study the film, and put in the practice. They have 4 games. That's it. It's win or go home. The Mayhem are not in a favorable position. It's going to take a lot to overcome this hole. Just get out there and go for it. Your odds of finding playoff success aren't very high currently, so just, take some risks. Don't be so afraid. But at this point, there is a lot of pressure on this group. They were expected to be a much better product than this, and I worry that this level of pressure and their current status and their mindset might hold them back and just collapse in on themselves. I'm hoping for the best, of course. There's still some things they can try before it's too late, but there is one heck of a mountain in front of them to climb, and the clock is most certainly their enemy. You better strap in, Mayhem fans, because the next month or so will be extremely stressful. Good luck. And that's just about all I have to say on what I personally think is wrong with the Mayhem, as well as some of the potential solutions that could come with them. Unfortunately, a lot of their answers have to do with some things that are very hard to change and require time, so this is going to be a very challenging hole to overcome, no doubt about it. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed today's discussion. Be sure to let me know what problems you see with Florida down in the comment section, and it would mean so much to me if you could give this video a like and drop a sub if you're new around here. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.